Hey everybody, my name is Sam Abbott and I work with Bean Group as a real estate professional in southern New Hampshire, primarily serving the Monadnock region as well as the Souhegan Valley. And so we're looking at today, several things, but things to consider when you're, interviewing a prospective real estate agent to represent you either in a purchase or a sale, wherever you might be, right? And questions to ask them so that you can help to get a better idea whether or not they're actually a good fit for what it is that you're trying to do, right? And so, talked about a lot of things, but another thing to consider more for sellers than it is for buyers is, what's your marketing proposal look like? Like what sort of marketing are you going to be doing in order to get as much demand on my home as possible, right? Price is a function of supply and demand, right? So if we can get the more demand that we get on the home, naturally the better the price is going to be, right? The more that it's going to increase. And price is one thing, but also the conditions of the agreement are another thing to consider too. And that's sort of a conversation for another day. But to ask them, hey, that being said, like what are you doing to increase the demand on my home? Like how what's that look like? Some things that should be a given aren't necessarily, professional photography is a great example of this. Like it's seldom that an agent does not use professional photography in our market in this day and age, but they still do exist. And so, it's amazing really, and it's just like, how could you not be up to speed, to that end, right? Making sure that they hire a professional photographer to do the photography. I mean, unless they are a professional photographer. I mean, that does. I've seen serious agents who do their photography themselves and are very serious about it. And so I'm not knocking that, but it has to be of a high standard. The highest standard possible, right? And so that leads into the next thing. Like, is that all you do? Just shoot some professional photography and put it in the multiple listing service and wait until somebody tries to sell it? Or do you actively market the home? Most agents don't actively market the home, and so this is something to think about, it's like, and to ask them is like, what, literally, practically, what do you do, Another thing, is thinking about, like, how many real estate websites do you syndicate the listing to, and in New Hampshire, just entering the property into the multiple listing service and checking a few boxes will syndicate the property, the listing, to hundreds of other real estate websites, right? But then you can go further than that, and like our firm is a member of Real Estate Companies of the World, right? Which is basically this large conglomerate of brokerages throughout the world, right? And so our properties, our listings all get syndicated to all of those other websites as well, and real estate companies of the world.com, right? So it's just more exposure, right? And especially as we get into the higher end tier properties, like, you want as much exposure on it as possible, and you want it as global as possible too, right? And so, when I'm representing a high-end property, I'm also a member of Luxury Portfolio International, which is it's a division of Real Estate Companies of the World, actually, that is effectively their luxury division, if you will. And so we get, it's not free, but I get, my people get all this additional exposure, and we're also able to do much more kind of advanced advertising campaigns than one would otherwise be able to do on their own, or at least that one would probably think to otherwise do on their own, right? And so, again, and on a high-end listing, like, what of those things are we doing? Are we doing retargeting marketing? Are we going to have like either a print ad campaign in something like the Wall Street Journal? Or are we going to, do these sorts of things, or what's that look like? So I mean, taking it back down from high-end into something more local, like, what about video? Like, are you doing, kind of like video walkthrough tours? Are you doing Matterport scans, which is basically like a virtual walkthrough that allows you to, you click here and you're walking into the next room, and then you click over there and you're walking to that side of the room. These sorts of things have been really helpful, particularly during the pandemic, because it gives our buyers that aren't necessarily local, they can't, just hop right over to the house to go see it, an opportunity to really view it. And I mean, I think last year I had 4 or 5 sales that were sight unseen. The buyer had not been there in person. I represent the seller in every case, but the buyer hadn't been there in person to see the property until either the final walkthrough, the day of, or a couple days before closing, or in some cases the closing. And in some cases, not even, they didn't even go to the closing. I mean, they just didn't see the thing until they literally had bought it already. And so in situations like that, to have these sorts of mediums, these sorts of abilities, these ways to expose the property to market, using virtual walkthrough, using video, things like this, having three-dimensional floor plans, etc. These are really advantageous things to do, and finally, I'll end because we're running out of time here. But another thing is, potentially, like something I've been doing is a pre-listing inspection, right? So what I'm seeing a lot, and I don't want to get too specific here, kind of for the sake of the video, but what I'm seeing a lot is that buyers are offering whatever they have to offer, and then they're coming back in the inspection contingency portion of the transaction and trying to take it all back, and this has become more pronounced, I think, in the last 6 months than it was in the first 6 months of last year. Well, really, I should say in the last 8 months than it was in the first 6 months of last year. Is that buyers are I'm making a general statement, but that they're trying, they'll write a lot of things into the offer so they can get it under agreement and win out against other offers, but then they try to beat you back up into the inspection process and get the money back out of you if they can. And so, having a pre-inspection done as a seller, as I said, when you have a home inspector come and inspect the property prior and you make that available to prospective buyers, it eliminates some of the risk, because you've disclosed literally everything that you could possibly disclose. They cannot legally come back and negotiate on any items that were not previously disclosed. And you could get into the legalities of that, and some people would argue differently, but it's, it mitigates a lot of the risk. Anything you find out in that inspection, you're going to know about now, and he'll have the opportunity to remedy either before it goes to market or before it goes to closing. And that transparency, I think, speaks a lot to buyers who probably, in my experience this year, are getting a little bit frustrated and have been, and so they feel like they're getting taken advantage of already. That's one way to lessen that a little bit. So longer video, but hopefully that's helpful. Again, the question to ask is, what are you going to do to market my property? How are you going to differentiate from the competition? Thank you.